A warm and affectionate welcome to everyone, particularly the young people throughout the world, to a slice of thought generated in me by a visual that I happened to chance upon in recent times. First, the visual. The visual is that of an Orthodox priest, Syrian Orthodox priest in Kerala, auctioning Jesus Christ. Of course, it's a portrait of Jesus, and that portrait shows only the face of Jesus, and it's framed. And as we know, a framed face is only two-dimensional. It has length, it has breadth, but it has no depth. It has length and breadth, but it has no depth. So this is being auctioned, and the priest who is auctioning Jesus Christ is doing it with utmost excitement. He is in his true elements as he drags the congregation or the people participating in that process to lower and lower and lower levels of stupidity in cozening them of their money. As the old proverb says, a fool and his money are soon parted. So, like an expert in playing upon the vanity of the people, this priest leads them from, say, beginning at the base price of 500 rupees, all the way up to 1,50,000 rupees for a cheap reprint of the portrait of Jesus, which should normally cost about 100 to 150 rupees. So this is the spectacle that I saw. When I saw it, first my heart sank. I felt it like an open-handed slap on my face. I took a little while to recover from that shock. Then my mind began to think and analyzed the indignation that I felt at this spectacle. And I'm going to share with you what I came to understand through it all. So let's get started. Now, as I said, the central act is that of putting up Jesus to auction. Now, in order to auction Jesus, Jesus has to be reduced. A human being is at least three-dimensional. I believe that a human being is four-dimensional, but let that be. Let's say at least three-dimensional. Height, breadth, and depth. The worst condemnation of a human being, as Soren Kierkegaard said long ago, is to call him shallow. A shallow person is one who only has a semblance of depth but has none of it. Or in the characterization of fictional characters, the categorization of fictional characters effected by E.M. Forster is a flat character as against a round character. The difference between a flat character and a round character is that a flat character is two-dimensional, whereas a round character is three-dimensional. That is to say, a round character has depth in him or her. And Kierkegaard would say that the worst condemnation of a human being is to call him shallow, call him two-dimensional, in the words of E.M. Forster. Now, in order to put Jesus up to auction, you have to reduce him to the level of being two-dimensional. And who is he? He is the Son of God. And if he is truly the Son of God, he is not only three-dimensional, he is also four-dimensional. That's why I say that as per the words of St. John in the Gospel of John chapter 1 verse 12, to those who received him and believed in his name, To them he gave the authority to become children of God. And if indeed we are children of God, we are not only three-dimensional, we are also four-dimensional. And the fourth dimension is something that the power of language cannot really deal with. Therefore, I'm not going to really describe or explain to you in detail. I have to leave it to your spiritual intuition to enter into an exploration of what the fourth dimension is. Let's now come to this, the auction part. So, what happens to Jesus when he's brought into the framework of religion is that he has to be reduced. He has to be reduced to a two-dimensional character. Jesus as a four-dimensional character cannot be accommodated within the two-dimensional framework of organized religion. That is the reason why the religion of his day, Judaism, decided that exterminating him was a fundamental need which could not be postponed, and he could not be allowed to go on with his ministry because that ministry was bringing into the aware consciousness of human beings of a dimension that no organized religion has the wherewithal to deal with. So the crucifixion of Jesus became a religious imperative. And I can actually, in that sense, understand why Caiaphas, as the promoter and protector of Judaism, decided to incur this ultimate crime, this blasphemy, for the sake of the religion he was called upon to serve and protect. So this is the reality. Now, let's look at this picture with utmost charity. Utmost charity. First, I said that this is only a two-dimensional of Jesus Christ can be sold or auctioned off. I still hold on to that position, but now for the sake of argument, let's say that what the priest auctioned off was not a two-dimensional cut to size or reduced Jesus, but a flesh and blood Jesus, a three-dimensional Jesus, a Jesus with depth. Let's assume that. For the sake of argument, that's not the case at all, because a three-dimensional person can never be auctioned. That's a blasphemy we cannot even imagine. But there is a novel in the English literature, a novel by Thomas Hardy under the title Mayor of Casterbridge, in which the main character, Michael Henjard, in a drunken state, auctions off his wife. And that becomes the seed of the tragedy of Michael Henjard. It's a very absorbing story, very, very readable, as all novels of Thomas Hardy are. And fortunately for me, Thomas Hardy is an Indian favorite. Many Indians may not like novelists like Joseph Conrad or the 18th century novelists, but they take very readily to Thomas Hardy and his novels. Apart from being very readable, Thomas Hardy is a very sentimental novelist, and Indians are a very sentimental people. It has got its plus and minus points, but again, that's not our main focus today. So let's assume that it's a three-dimensional Jesus who was being auctioned off. But even if you assume that, it is still a reduced picture because it's only the face and the bust of Jesus, and the bust of Jesus not in full, but a part of the bust of Jesus, right? Now, I don't have to tell you that Jesus is more than a face. At any rate, no one really knows what the face of Jesus looked like. The face that's familiar to us, actually the many faces that are familiar to us, are all the creations of artists, artistic imagination. Of course, there is a legend that when Jesus was carrying the cross and moving his painful way to the Via Dolorosa, the way of sorrow and suffering, to Golgotha, a lady came and wiped his face, and his face got etched magically or supernaturally on that piece of cloth. And that became then the foundation for creating the portraits of Jesus ever since. There is absolutely no biblical base for it. It is a legend. It has no material evidence to back it, but people are sentimental about religion, therefore they readily endorse such legends and stories. At any rate, they add a little color to an otherwise dull, drab landscape, so why not? So we do not really know the face of Jesus Christ. And yet, we have a portrait of Jesus which includes part of his bust, and that's put on auction. Now, the point I'm making is this. This is, even if we consider it as the three-dimensional thing, it is still an insufferable insult to Jesus, because Jesus is a whole person. If you look at the spiritual vision of Jesus Christ, from start to finish, you find in him an emphasis on the need to attain wholeness, completeness. For example, when Jesus says, be perfect even as your heaven is perfect, that perfection is another synonym for wholeness. Whenever he healed somebody, he said, your faith has made you whole. Jesus said, I've come that you may have life in all its fullness, life in its wholeness. The beauty of Jesus' personality is the beauty, the rare beauty, I have to say, of wholeness in personality. Actually, the tragedy of human beings that we live our life in part. As T.S. Eliot, one of the British poets and verse dramatist, writes in his very famous play, Murder in the Cathedral, living and partly living, living and partly living. That more or less describes the human condition, which is also the seed of human tragedy. If you can bear with me a little bit of literary references, let me also refer to a book by the German philosopher Nietzsche. The title of the book is The Birth of Tragedy, where he says, life is a terrible plant springing from the soil of primordial suffering. Over a world broken up into fragments, nature laments, for this dismemberment is the very seed of our tragedy. So Nietzsche is also intuiting the Judeo-Christian insight that the tragedy of human life, or what he calls the seed of human tragedy, is the fragmentariness, the fact that no human being actually lives his life in wholeness. We relate to everything, including ourselves, in part. And St. Paul, when he writes to Corinthians in that very famous chapter, chapter 13, which is a rhapsody on love, he says, now we know in part, but a time is coming when we shall know in full. When the full comes, the part or the partial will go away. So this is a reality, and this has been verified, supported, endorsed by people from a variety of backgrounds. So it's just not one man's angular perception, but it's a consensual position where people from different disciplines agree that human life, the tragedy of human life, the seed of our suffering, our sorrow, our frustrations, is the fact that all human beings tend to live life in part, living and partly living, as T.S. Eliot puts it. Okay, now Jesus came in order to deliver us from that position, that situation, because in that situation we cannot do justice to our humanity. Our humanity is suffocated, and it is like Lazarus dead, being wrapped up in swaddling clothes and put comfortably in a tomb. He is there. And as living in part or partly living is like the body of Lazarus being inside the tomb. The potential for that body to wake up into a new quality of life is always there, but it never happens. And until we tumble into our grave, we continue to be prisoners of this partness, not partiality, but partness, as contrast to wholeness, right? So, I'm putting all these things together so as to create a framework for understanding the insult immanent in the priest's activity of so successfully and prosperously auctioning of Jesus Christ. 1,50,000 rupees. So now let's examine this. When Jesus was involved in his public ministry lasting 3 years, as we know, as recorded in the four gospels, three synoptic gospels and the Johannine gospel, he presented a picture of wholeness. In fact, Jesus came to tell us what it means to be human, completely human. And that fourth dimension is the extra sensorial intuition, you call it supernatural intuition, of a realm beyond the physical and the terrestrial, beyond the manifest and the evident, and the need to be in concourse with that realm for human life to attain wholeness. That's all I would say for the present. It's a subject that deserves or merits or needs far greater elaboration than I can fit into this video. Otherwise, the time frame for the video will get out of hand. Now let's look at how Jesus was during his public ministry. You think of that woman you find in the 5th chapter of the Gospel according to Mark, who comes squeezing her way through the crowd that was milling around Jesus. She comes and touches the hem of Jesus' clothes. Power flows out from Jesus and heals her. And you ask that woman, what do you think of the smart priest auctioning of Jesus, the face of Jesus, for 1,50,000 rupees? That woman will explode into indignation. He would say, I touched that man's clothes, the hem of his clothes. He's not only a face, he's an amazing person. He is the walking embodiment of ultimate wholeness. How in the world can you reduce him to a two-dimensional face that you can put up to auction? Or think of that man that you encounter in the 8th chapter of Matthew's Gospel. He is a victim of leprosy. He approaches Jesus but doesn't come very near to him, stands at a distance and says, Lord, if only you say a word, I shall be cleansed. Jesus stretches his hand and touches him, and that moment he is rendered clean and he becomes whole. You ask that man, what do you think of putting up Jesus to auction, a portrait made beautifully, which can fetch maybe 30 pieces of silver? He would be indignant, he would burn with indignation. He would say, till the other day, till I came into contact with the Galilean, my skin was rotting. My nerves were being eaten up with bacilli. He touched me. I know the power of his hand. How dare you reduce him to a face, a two-dimensional face, because of your covetousness? He would say, I'll have none of it. Get lost. Or you think of the woman you encounter in the 7th chapter of the Gospel according to Luke, where Jesus is found in the household of a Pharisee called Simon, invited there to have a meal with them, a gesture of acknowledgement and respect grudgingly extended to a man who does not have much of religious accreditation. And very likely that meal was organized in a condescending fashion. The reason why a woman had to come and offer a corrective which activates indignation in the Pharisee, because it reminds him of what he should have done but he didn't care to do, as Jesus himself tells him. And you ask that woman, is not Jesus only a face? She would say, what the hell do you mean? I know his feet. I know the beauty of it. Because those feet walk the face of the earth, my life was transformed. Look at me. Look at me. I'm a new creation. How dare you reduce him to a two-dimensional face that you can put him up to auction? My dear friends, this is the difference between Jesus of Nazareth and the watered-down version of Jesus accommodated comfortably in the narrow framework of our religion, where the wholeness of Jesus cannot be fitted in. We cannot bear the burden of the wholeness of Jesus' person. We have to water him down. We have to slice him down. We have to reduce him to a two-dimensional face. Why? Because of our covetousness. You see, we cannot resist the temptation to sell everything. Or in the words of Karl Marx, we cannot resist the temptation to reduce even God into a commodity. Commodity is a loaded word in Marxian thought, as you know. We reduce God to a commodity that it may be put to the into the market for sale. You know, when religion becomes an industry, as invariably it does with the passage of time, and particularly when religion enters the age of materialism, consumerism, commercialism, etc. The main activity in religion is commoditizing the sacred and putting up matters godly to the market of human covetousness. And then you hear, instead of the angelic praise of God, the tinkling of the coins. It is this reality that is prefigured through the busy market that was thriving beside the temple at Jerusalem. Religion and commercialism are two sides of the same coin. And in that market, it's not bread and butter that's being sold, it's God who is being sold. It's God who is being sold. That is the reason why Jesus was so indignant, and he lost his control for a moment, and he took a whip and drove these blasphemers out of sight. He upset their tables, and he caused havoc in this blasphemy of a market where God was being sold. Unfortunately, we don't experience that righteous indignation anymore because we've got so used to it. Nobody today says, "Why have you turned my father's house into a den of thieves?" We believe that it's a very smart thing to do. I'm sure that this Syrian Orthodox priest was smart enough to sell Jesus for 150,000 rupees, the two-dimensional face of Jesus, which should have cost, say, 100 rupees, 150 rupees. He would be hailed as a particularly competent and efficient priest. He would be hailed as a model priest. And the day he managed to sell Jesus for a princely sum of 150,000 rupees, he would become the model priest. He would become the object of admiration, because that's where our heart is. Let me close by quoting the words of Jesus. No man can serve two masters, God and mammon. Either you will love the one or you will hate the other. No one can serve God and mammon. I repeat, no one can serve God and mammon.